Holding lightly, the Buddha's way of release. I used to believe that holding tightly was how I stayed safe, holding to my past, my roles, my explanations. But I began to notice how much effort that required, how heavy it made even simple moments. This reflection is an invitation to see what happens when I start holding life a little more lightly. The weight you carry. You may notice how quietly the past sits in the body. Not as clear memories, but as tension behind the eyes, across the chest, in the way the breath hesitates before fully arriving. Regret does not always announce itself. Often it lives as a subtle pressure, a feeling that something must still be accounted for, corrected, justified. The Buddha noticed this long before it had a name. He saw how the mind returns again and again to what cannot be changed, mistaking repetition for responsibility. When you replay old choices, it can feel like vigilance, even care. As if keeping the past close might prevent future harm. But the Buddha's way of seeing is gentler and more precise. He observed that what we call protection often functions as punishment. The mind tightens around a frozen image of who you were, and life is asked to orbit it. The present thins, awareness narrows, and yet nothing is repaired. Imagine lives. Regret feeds on comparison. Not with others, but with imagined versions of yourself, lives that might have unfolded more smoothly, more wisely, more beautifully if a single decision had gone differently. These imagined timelines feel vivid. They whisper promises of peace that seem just out of reach. The Buddha recognized this movement as craving directed backward, a longing for a past that never truly existed. As attention drifts into these imagined lives, energy quietly drains from the only place it can be used, here. You may feel tired without knowing why, disconnected while being busy. The Buddha did not argue with these thoughts. He simply watched how they functioned. When seen clearly, comparison dissolves. Reality returns to center. Only this life can be lived. Only this moment can be shaped. Seeing the process. The Buddha once pointed to the mind like a river, never the same, yet always flowing. There is relief in realizing you are not a fixed moment in time. Not the worst choice you made. Not the version of yourself who did not yet know. The Buddha invited this recognition not as philosophy, but as observation. Look closely. The body changes. Feelings change. Understanding changes. Even regret itself is not stable. As this is seen, something loosens. Learning remains, but suffering does not need to accompany it. Memory becomes informative rather than sharp. The past no longer presses so heavily because it is no longer asked to define you. Awareness replaces self-attack. What once felt like accountability softens into intelligence. When grief is allowed. As regret loosens, another experience often surfaces: grief. Clean grief. Not the looping fixation that tightens the chest, but a quieter mourning for what was lost, what could not be protected, what ended. The Buddha did not turn away from this. He understood that when grief is allowed to move, it completes. You may feel it like weather passing through tears that arrive without a story, sadness without self-blame. This is not weakness, it is integration. Energy returns as emotion finishes its work. The past informs without defining. Identity releases its grip on single decisions and old narratives. Life begins to widen again. The subtler clinging. When obvious suffering eases, subtler attachment reveals itself. The attachment to self-image, the need to be needed, to be right, to be indispensable. The Buddha noticed how easily identity hides inside good intentions. Emotional clinging is mistaken for love. Intensity is mistaken for depth. Through careful attention, reactions are seen for what they are, not proof of care, but signs of insecurity. The Buddha did not condemn this. He simply showed how fear drives grasping. When fear is seen, it no longer needs to command behavior. The heart begins to rest. Listening without agenda. The Buddha taught that clinging turns meeting into managing. As ego loosens, attachment softens. Listening deepens. Control relaxes. You may notice how often conversation had been used to secure reassurance or protect an image. Without that need, something quieter emerges. Presence. Relationships shift from validation to meeting. Connection becomes cleaner and more equal. Care remains, but without agenda. Love no longer serves identity, it serves awareness. The Buddha's way does not make life smaller. It makes it more honest. The end of urgency. With fear no longer driving behavior, something unexpected appears: reliability. Not urgency, not intensity, steadiness. Responses slow down. Reactions soften. Choices align with values rather than anxiety. The Buddha saw this as right effort, not forcing, but alignment. You may find yourself staying present under pressure, listening without defensiveness, responding without panic. This steadiness is not cultivated through willpower. It arises naturally when grasping releases its grip. The mind no longer needs to rush to secure itself. Fewer promises, truer words. Detachment reveals that reliability is not about always saying yes or fixing everything. It is about clarity, about consistency of presence, about knowing limits and honoring them. The Buddha emphasized this kind of honesty, one that does not inflate or withdraw. Words become dependable because they are not spoken to soothe fear. Commitments are fewer, but they last. There is dignity in this simplicity. Life feels less crowded. Attention has room to breathe. Proportional response. The Buddha compared wisdom to tuning a string, not too tight, not too loose. Emotional steadiness replaces volatility. Boundaries strengthen without hostility. Communication becomes direct, honest, and calm. Mistakes are acknowledged without collapse. Repair happens without drama. Trust grows not from perfection, but from proportion. You may notice how situations that once triggered strong reactions now pass with less disturbance. Not because you care less, but because you see more. The Buddha's insight reveals that balance is not indifference. It is clarity. Availability without performance. Detachment does not make you distant. It makes you available. Available without self-monitoring. Available without manipulation. Available without needing to be special or admired. Presence replaces performance. The Buddha understood how exhausting it is to maintain an image. When that effort relaxes, energy returns to life itself. Encounters feel simpler. Moments feel more complete. There is nothing extra to manage. Endings without collapse. Life continues to change. Endings still come. Loss still hurts. The Buddha never denied this. What changes is the aftermath. Dignity remains intact. Self-worth is no longer tied to outcomes. You hold relationships, roles, plans, and even identity more lightly, not because they matter less, but because fear no longer governs them. What stays, stays freely. What leaves, leaves without tearing the self apart. Alignment over control. The Buddha taught that peace comes from moving with life, not mastering it. In holding lightly, life does not slip away, it settles. The nervous effort to secure every outcome relaxes. Action continues, but without strain. This is not passivity. It is intelligent cooperation with reality. Peace emerges not from control, but from alignment. The mind learns to trust its own resilience. Attention rests where it is needed and releases where it is not. Trust revealed. Detachment is finally understood not as escape, but as trust. Trust in learning. Trust in resilience. Trust in life's movement. The Buddha pointed to this trust not as belief, but as lived confidence. You may feel it as a quiet strength, a sense that whatever arises can be met without collapse. Care remains. Sensitivity remains. What dissolves is fear's authority. Caring without fear. To hold lightly is not to care less. It is to care without fear. Love no longer needs to grip. Responsibility no longer needs to punish. Presence becomes the offering. In this way, life becomes livable again, steady, open, and real. The Buddha's insight does not remove difficulty. It removes the extra weight carried on top of it. What remains? The Buddha observed that when grasping ends, clarity remains. What remains is simple: awareness, responsiveness. A heart no longer at war with time. You move through the world informed by the past, but not imprisoned by it. Open to the future, but not chasing it. This is holding lightly, not an achievement, but a way of seeing. And in that seeing, freedom quietly unfolds. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. Thanks for your time. It's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.